Well, everybody agrees it is important to file taxes properly, but what about IRS Form 8832? In this show, I want to give you line by line instructions when it comes to filing IRS Form 8832. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another edition of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. How are you today? I hope you are doing fantastic. I'm doing marvelous, if you were to ask me. If you are doing as great as I am, go grab a cup of coffee or tea or vodka and let's roll. In today's conversation, I want to really cover IRS Form 8832. Now, this show has two sections. First, I'm going to cover the fundamentals of Form 8832. I will explain to you what the form is and all the important things you need to know. And then in the second session of this show, I will talk about the specific instructions on how to fill and file the form. Now, the IRS has been audited they've been auditing thousands of taxpayers on Form 8832 lately. So for us, it's kind of important to explain the fundamental concepts about the Form 8832. That's why I'm making sure I'm taking time to explain what you need to understand. Having said that, if you want just the line by line instructions, you just want to skip the first section, you just want to go straight to the second section. Form 8832 is a complex topic, but after watching this show, I promise you will understand everything. Let's just get right into it. So, what is Form 8832? This form is used by a business to elect or change how it will be classified for federal tax purposes, including as a corporation, partnership, or as a disregarded entity. I'll talk about that later on. Let me give you an example. If you currently have an LLC, but you prefer to be taxed as a C corporation, you would fill out and submit Form 8832. It can also be used if your LLC is currently being taxed as a C corporation, but you would rather be taxed as a partnership or sole proprietor. So this Form 8832 is used by LLCs to elect how they wish to be taxed. And remember, though, that LLCs are created under state laws and not recognized as a type of entity for federal income taxes. Consequently, LLC owners must elect their entity type for federal income taxes. And LLC with one owner, and those are known as single member LLCs, they can choose between being taxed as a sole proprietor, C corporation, or S corporation. LLC with more than one owner, and those are known as multi-member LLC, they can choose between being taxed as a partnership, C corporation, or S corporation. One thing I want to say here is that there are important tax differences between partnerships, S corps, and C corps, because C corps must pay taxes on their income at the corporate level, and so owners of C corporation must also pay tax on their individual returns, but only if the C corporation pays them a dividend. Partnerships and S corporation do not pay tax on their income. Rather, all of their business income is included in the owner's personal return, even if no cash was distributed to the owner. This is very important to understand. So the primary difference between partnerships and S corporations is that the income from a partnership is subject to self-employment tax, where income from an S corporation is not. All right. Now, who's eligible to make an 8832 election? Partnerships and both single member and multiple member LLCs are eligible to file Form 8832. Now, certain foreign entities are eligible to file this form as well, and LLCs can also file Form 8832 if they wish to revert back to a previous tax classification. One thing that you also need to understand is who must file Form 8832. So you can an LLC that elects to be treated as a C corporation must file 8832. A single member LLC wishing to be treated as a sole proprietor or a multi-member LLC wishing to be treated as a partnership does not have to file any form because these are the default treatments. So any LLC wishing to be treated as an S corporation should file Form 2553. Okay, 2553 instead of Form 8832 if you are an LLC and you wish to be treated as an S corporation. So right now, if you look at the screen, we have done a very nice summary for you, a summary of LLC choices and how they make the election. You can see that on the screen right now for single member LLC. single member LLC who wants to be treated as a C Corp, single member LLC as an S Corp. So please take a look, take 15 seconds to look at this, this right now. Very important. All right. You can even take a screenshot, or you can just take a note. Now, choosing how to be taxed has long-term consequences and is one of the most important decisions a limited liability company will ever make. This is very important. Form 8832 can be filed if, let's say, an LLC wants to change how they are taxed. Let me give you an example. Let's say an LLC can elect to change back from an S corporation or C corporation to a partnership. However, changing from one type of entity to another after operations have begun is usually a taxable event. So really, I highly recommend you sort of enlist the help of a tax professional before choosing the tax status of your business. Very important. Who is not eligible to file Form 8832? Sole proprietors. So if you're a sole proprietor, I want you to listen right now. Sole proprietors are not eligible to make an 8832 election. So corporations are also generally not eligible to file, with the exception of LLCs that previously chose a corporate tax return and wish to change their classification. And why should you file Form 8832? Now, it's optional. If you're happy with your current tax status, guess what? You will not need to file this form. But the thing here is that in reality, in practice, many LLCs can reduce their tax burden by changing the default tax status they were assigned when they were formed. So if you and your accountant determine that it's financially advantageous to change your default tax status, filing an 8832 gives you the option, really, of being taxed as a sole proprietor, a partnership, or a C corporation. And what about the deadline? Because this is very important. What about the deadline for filing Form 8832? There is actually, the IRS hasn't come up with any formal deadline, so there is no formal deadline for filing a Form 8832. But when you file it, it can have implications on when your new tax classification kicks in. Let me give you an example. Your new classification cannot take effect more than 75 days prior to the date the election is filed, or later than 12 months after filing, according to the IRS. And let me just repeat that this is very important. Your new classification cannot take effect more than 75 days prior to the date of the election is filed, or later than 12 months after filing, according to the IRS. And so, if we were to give an example, let's say you actually you file the date of the election. You file an election, let's say January 30th. So January 30th, 75 days prior. So 75 days prior. So we have 30 days. That's January. December, that's another 60 days. So we're going November 15, November 16, right? So it cannot take effect more than 70. It cannot take effect before November 15. All right. So where should you file Form 8832? Now, Form 8832 cannot be filed electronically. You cannot do it electronically. So you have to mail in the paperwork to the IRS. All right. If you want more info, you can actually go on the IRS website and look for instructions for Form 8832. And those instructions provide two different mailing addresses depending upon where the LLC is located. Remember, an LLC is a state legal formation, but it has consequences at the federal fiscal level. So we're showing you right now on the screen here. Please take a look, and you can actually. So if you are taxpayers in the states below, you know where to mail the form to this address. There are two addresses, either in Kansas City or Ogden, Utah. All right. So please pay attention. We're going to leave this on the screen right now. So identify where your LLC is located, and match the corresponding address where you need to send the form. All right. I'll be right back right after this. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks, to another section of the Awesome Sweetie Kiwi Show. We're still having a conversation today about IRS Form 8832. I'm giving you line-by-line instruction. Now I'm going to give you those instructions. So Form 8832 is a 2-page, 11-question form from the IRS. So what you will need, you need your business information, including name, employer identification number, EIN, and address. There are also several options to update your information, including, let's say, if you've moved since applying for an EIN or filing your most recent return, you need to check the address change box. We're showing this to you right now. All right. And if you qualify to file the classification late, check the late classification relief sought under Revenue Procedure 2009-41 box. And if you are requesting late election relief, check the relief for a late change of entity classification election sought under Revenue Procedure 2010-32 box. You can see those boxes on, we're showing this to you right now on the first, on the screen, the basic business information. All right, so the top of Form 8832 requires some basic business info, including business name, address, phone number, EIN. I already said that. It could also be a tax ID. The thing here is you need to have an EIN, folks, because if you want to submit Form 8832, you need to have an EIN. And the IRS will not process the form if you leave this field blank or input your social security number instead. Okay, so now let's go with Part 1. Part 1, election information. So line 1, you need to choose the type of election. Box 1A, check this if you are requesting an initial classification. And box 1B, check this if you are requesting a change in your classification. Very important. So in Part 1, Question 1, you'll be asked to choose your reason for filling out Form 8832. This is very important to sort of remember. All right, so line 2A, indicate, we're showing this to you on right now on the screen. You can see right now we have the box on the screen. You can see, you can follow with me. All right. Line 2, indicate whether you have filed an entity election within the last 60 months. If yes, go to line 2B. If not, go to line 3. Line 2B. So you have to say yes. Check this if your prior election was an initial classification. If yes box is checked, though, folks, you should go to line 3. I just said that. If you check the no box, you are not currently eligible to make an election. The IRS typically allows one change in your tax election every 5 years. Very important, every 5 years. So an exception is if the previous election was for a newly formed entity and the election was effective on the business date of formation. And there is a second exception if more than 50% of the business's ownership interests have changed since the previous election. However, this is very important. To file a new Form 8832 under this exception requires a private letter ruling from the IRS, which requires a hefty user's fee along with professional fees to hire a tax attorney. Line 3, indicate whether there is more than one owner of your business. So if yes, you can elect to be classified as a partnership, or association that is taxable as a corporation. If no, you can elect to be classified as an association taxable as a corporation, or you can choose to be disregarded as a separate entity. So folks, we're still showing you on the screen right now. You will see on the screen what we're talking about here. Very, very important. All right. And one thing I also want to say here is that, so line 4, you want to provide the name and EIN of the single owner. Question 3 and question 4 actually about owner information. In question 3, you need to specify if the business has one owner or multiple owners. If the business has only one owner, you want to indicate the name of the owner in question 4. If the identifying number usually means the owner's social security number. If the owner is a business entity, then the identifying number may be an EIN. Line 5, you need to provide the name and EIN of the parent corporation if owned by one or more affiliated corporations. And if the owner or owners of your business are a group of affiliated company that file a consolidated return, you'll need to specify the parent company and its EIN in question 5. So this question is to ensure really that each company in the group receives the correct tax treatment. Okay. And line 6, you need to choose the type of entity you want to elect with options available for both domestic and foreign entities. And this is really, if you really think about it, this is the heart of Form 8832, folks. This is where you elect how you want to be taxed. So below, on the screen right now, I'm going to give you a list of your choices along with a brief description of each. So you want to choose A if your business was formed in the United States and you want to be taxed as a C corporation. Remember, if you want to be taxed as an S corporation, you need to fill out Form 2553, not Form 8832. I already said that. Choose B if your business was formed in the U.S. and you want to be taxed as a partnership. Choose C if your business was formed in the US and you want to be taxed as a sole proprietorship. Choose D if a business is a foreign entity and you want to be taxed as a C corporation. Choose E if a company is a foreign entity and you want to be taxed as a partnership. Choose F if a company is a foreign entity and you want to be taxed as a sole proprietorship. This is a very important decision with long-term tax consequences, folks, that cannot be undone. They cannot be undone. So think about this carefully. And I personally recommend talking to your accountant or tax professional before submitting the form. Remember, as I said earlier, you are limited to one change in tax status every 5 years. Every 5 years. So an error here can be costly. So bottom line here is you want to be sure that the option you choose on your 8832 is the correct one. Line 7 here. Line 7, if a foreign entity is chosen, you must provide the name of the foreign entity. So you want to provide the country where the business was created, if not the US. And the thing is that some US territories are considered foreign entities for tax purposes. So you need to go to Form 8832 on page 8 so you can have a list of countries if you're not sure. On line 8, you want to indicate the date you wish the election to become effective. Remember, that date, as I said earlier, can generally be no sooner than 75 days before you file Form 8832 and no later than 12 months after you file Form 8832. So if the date field is left blank, the IRS will use the form submission date as the effective date. In question 8, you also need to pay attention to one thing. On line 9 and 10, you need to put the name and telephone number. For this question, you will need to provide the name, title, and phone number of the person that the IRS should contact should there be any questions about your form. Remember that Form 8832 should be signed by a business owner, manager, or officer of the business. All right, very important. And the signature. So you just complete and sign the consent statement with an authorized signature, date, and title. And those authorized to sign Form 8832 include all current owners of the entity. All right. And one thing that I also want to mention here, this is very, very important, is that in question on line 8, you need to choose when you want your tax election to take effect. And if you are, let's say you are a new business, then the effective date should be the date your business began operations, right? An election effective after operation began creates a complex tax scenario. So you want to consult right now a tax professional. And anytime I mention the word tax professional, I'm talking about 3 professional categories: either an EA, an enrolled agent, a CPA, a certified public accountant, or a tax attorney. Now, in between, you can have an experienced tax accountant. But if you're really looking for like top of the top, some kind of quality, you want to go for those designations: fiscal attorney, enrolled agent, EA, or CPA. Now let's talk about part 2, the late election relief. I mentioned that briefly earlier. So Form 8832 is due 75 days after the effective date. So you may be eligible for a late election relief if you meet the following criteria. And the IRS is very adamant, very thorough when checking whether or not a taxpayer meets this criteria. So you need to meet the following criteria. You have already submitted a Form 8832 and were denied solely because it was filed late. You are up to date on all your taxes. There is a reasonable cause for the delay. Form 8832 is no more than 3 years late. If this applies to you, you want to explain the reasonable cause for delay in the blank space on the form, on Form 8832. And line 11, so explanation of why Form 8832 was not filed on time. An entity may be eligible for a late election relief in certain circumstances. Now, remember though that it's very important that to be eligible for that, to actually have the IRS read the reasonable cause for delay that you wrote and actually grant you the relief you want. You need to be clear in the blank space. You need to be clear in your explanatory statement. So one thing you need to really mention here is that make sure that you explain why your tax, you need to say that your tax deadline has not passed from for the current year's federal tax filing, and you are currently up to date on all federal tax filings. And I'm talking about not just at the company level, but also at the personal level. So you are up to date on all your taxes. All right. And the thing here is that if your business meets the requirements, you need to make sure that you not only sign it, you not only explain it, but you need to sign the form, and you need to actually keep a copy for yourself. Very important to think about the paperwork here. You need to keep a copy so that if the IRS has to get back to you and ask more questions, you're able to actually answer all the questions. All right. So this is really about it. Let me see. Okay, this is about it, folks. This was a short convo about Form 8832. I was giving you line-by-line instructions, and I actually also talked about, just kind of give you a quick recap here. The show was divided into two sections. So in the first section, I showed you the fundamentals of Form 8832, and the second section, we spoke about line-by-line instructions for filing Form 8832. So I explained to you what is Form 8832, who is eligible to make an 8832 election, who must file Form 8832, who is not eligible to file Form 8832, why should you file Form 8832, what is the deadline for filing Form 8832, and where should you file Form 8832, with the understanding that you cannot e-file, you cannot file electronically this form. You can't do it. Thank you, folks. I will see you next time, but until then, remember, stay marvelous.